Okay. Have three here, so I'll take them all in order. And I think, Janis, I think this is appropriate for you, though comments from both of you are most appreciated. Should physician-assisted suicide be available to people suffering mortally from chronic, intractable... suffering mentally, yes, right. Mentally from chronic, intractable, yes, treatment-resistance depression.
Yes, I believe it absolutely should be. It needs to be much more verified in the sense that you don't have a lab test, you don't have an MRI. Depression is real. Depression is biochemical. It is a disease. It's an illness. It cannot always be treated. And it certainly makes life unbearable. Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank you. Next question is, how do we expose the popular pseudoscientists talking spirituality? Massimo, what would be your answer to that? You are both a scientist and you have been interested in pseudoscience.
That's a good question. I mean, as you know, there are lots of skeptic organizations that do a pretty good job at this. The problem is that a lot of the people who believe in that stuff are kind of refractory to external criticism. So I think that the exposure is there. I mean, it's like anybody who wants to be informed has plenty of resources to find out about these kinds of things. The question, I think, is how you persuade people, and that's a whole different issue. There is, of course, research on persuasion, right? And psychologists have studied this kind of stuff for decades. Unfortunately, it's not good news for us, because all of the research suggests that if you try to reason calmly and rationally with somebody, you are very unlikely to change her mind about things that they actually care a lot. You have to go for emotional manipulation, which most of us don't want to do. I mean, this is the entire Madison Avenue advertising industry is based on this fundamental concept, and as you know, it works very well. Now that said, I do believe that we're making progress in a number of areas. We do have resources available for people, and if people are interested on their own to find out about stuff, they can. Typically, when I used to do debates in the South, for instance, about creationism, I always decided right from the beginning that my target audience, was never the creationist, the fundamentalist, because you're not going to reach them. Period. What you do is you talk to the people in the middle. You talk to the people who are, maybe not too well informed, maybe a little bit on the fence and all that. And then what you hope is to reach them, and then they will reach their neighbor, and the neighbor will talk to their friend, and so on and so forth. Because if you go straight for the follower of Deepak Chopra, for instance, forget it. It's just not. It's not going to happen. You're really wasting your time. It's a question of, even the Stoics would have given up on that one.
Thank you. Janis, what is palliative care? How do you define that? Does it always work? Who does it benefit?
That's a great question. Palliative care basically means you've given up on the cure and you are making the person as comfortable as they can be. Most of the time, pain can be managed, especially if you get to the point of sedation, which you often do reach, and most places in this country will do that if pain is bad enough. But pain is only one part of an illness. And if you can't breathe due to COPD, or you have tremors due to Parkinson's, there is no palliative care for that. And that's the problem. We talk about pain as if that's the major problem, but it really isn't. It's the non-treatable parts of illnesses that I think cause the most havoc.
Okay, thank you. And again, for Massimo, who was, and I may be mispronouncing her name, Marcius, why was Seneca consoling her?
Yes, Marcia.
Marcia. Okay.
Yeah, Marcia was a friend of Seneca, and her son had died young. And she went through sort of grief, as you would expect. But then 2 years later, she was still grieving of her son, and she was essentially functionally incapable of doing anything else. And that is the point where Seneca wrote to her this long letter that you can find now, download for free on the internet, of course, that approached the issue of death and grief and the meaning of death from a Stoic perspective. The interesting thing, it's a beautiful letter. I mean, Seneca was one of the best Roman writers, period. Without him and Cicero, about the top two Roman writers in terms of style and prose. Now, Seneca used this approach, the epistolary approach, the writing letters to friends and family, to really espouse his philosophy. Like he didn't write treatises. He didn't write, this is a handbook of Stoicism, like Epictetus did. Well, Epictetus actually didn't write anything. One of his students did. But from Epictetus, we have the discourses that basically are his lectures. And we have the Enchiridion, which is the handbook. It's literally a short handbook on how to be a Stoic. Seneca didn't do anything like that. What he did was he wrote plays, which had very, very interesting plays, which had both political and philosophical sort of underpinnings. And then he wrote a bunch of letters. And the letters is where he actually presents his philosophy and he defends Stoicism. So Marcia was one of his friends.
Apologies to our Marcia. For a long time I called you Marcia, and now I realize that it is generally considered to be Marcia.
The Latin version.
This is for you, Janis. Alzheimer's Village, it sounds like that wonderful community in the Netherlands, which is such a delightful small country. Where is it? Small only in size, I might add. Where is this village? How much does it cost for 6 months?
Well, it is in the Netherlands. Where in the Netherlands, I honestly don't know. And I'm assuming that only citizens of the Netherlands get to go there, and I don't think you're allowed to have a short vacation there.
European citizens.
I don't know. Probably it's because it's covered by I assume, the Dutch healthcare system. I don't know if anyone else is eligible, but I think it's just a model that we need to not think about going there. We need to try to understand why we're spending thousands a day taking care of somebody and not coming close to that level of care. It ought to be a challenge to us, not, to emulate.
Thank you. This one will come from me and will be for you, Massimo. Abraham Lincoln is often considered our most compassionate president. Thomas Jefferson is often considered the most brilliant. Could you make a case based on Stoicism that Lincoln was the better president during the Civil War than Jefferson?
That is an interesting question. I don't know. I'm going to answer in a sort of indirect way, I suppose. One of the reasons I like Stoicism is precisely because the emphasis is on character, yes. Right? And so, the measure of a person for the Stoics is their character. So if there are reasons to think that Lincoln did the right thing, he acted courageously, and again we don't mean just physical courage, but courageous in the sense of doing the right thing at a time when it's difficult to do the right thing, or did things in a fair way, in a justice way, on a way to promote justice, then he's definitely a good person. Now from that perspective, I actually am going to put my bets on Lincoln as opposed to Jefferson. Yeah.
Personally, I consider that a perfect answer. This is the last question, and it is for you, Janis. And it concerns, I'm going to kind of rephrase the question. Do you have to be a Canadian citizen, and the implication is, in order to derive the benefits of the clearly superior laws in Canada in order to enjoy the benefits? And now the next question clarifies the first one. Can you establish residence in Canada easily? How far in advance?
I have, as soon as that law passed, I had a vision in my head. It was the the draftees of the Vietnam War who went to Canada, came back to the United States, I know, and now that they're my age, are headed back to Canada again. For the first time they went to save their life, and now they're going to end their life. We don't know, because every province has been charged with writing the law. This was a judicial decision. Every province will probably have some variation. My guess is that they will not want suicide tourism. They've got a huge country right to the south of them. And I would guess that they will write the law in such a way that you have to be a Canadian citizen. But that's a guess. Most countries don't really want suicide tourism.
Thank you. We do have a Canadian therapist here who spoke earlier. I wonder if you would comment on that. It might be that you are the person who can best answer that question.
Thanks. Yeah, that's an accurate description. So this was a decision by the Supreme Court of Canada a couple of months ago. More than 20 years ago, the Supreme Court of Canada faced the same question about physician-assisted suicide and ruled against it narrowly. The only Supreme Court judge from that time who's still on the court today, Beverly McLaughlin, had been in favor last time. She's now the Chief Justice. It was, she had written the minority decision last time. You may know we have a conservative government federally in Ottawa, and they're not excited about this. But on the other hand, Stephen Harper, our Prime Minister, is a very pragmatic leader, and he's not about to go against either the Supreme Court decision nor public opinion. By some estimates, by some opinion polls in Canada, there was upwards of 80% support for physician-assisted suicide prior to this decision. So the government, the court has given the government 1 year to rewrite the legislation. It's actually, I don't think it's the provinces, I think it's the federal government who, yeah.
The federal government will set some general guidelines.
Yeah.
But I think each province will.
So the implementation, also of note, Quebec, as a province prior to this and still ongoing, was introducing legislation to the same effect and would have butted heads against the Canadian Constitution had this not happened. As a physician myself, the interesting question, and more specifically as a psychiatrist, the interesting question will be the role of physicians and the regulation of physicians, and already the provincial licensing authorities, such as the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, are looking at this. And one final comment, which is that the same college in Ontario has already ruled on a very much relevant and related issue, and Tony, I think, was interested in this last year when it first came up, which is whether physicians have the right to refuse to provide a treatment, any treatment, it could be abortion, for example, or contraception based on their own religious conscience. That ruling was recently came out. They can refuse, but they cannot obstruct it. And in fact, they're obligated to refer the patient to another physician who will provide it. So this will be relevant also for physician-assisted suicide. Our role as psychiatrists will be to assess competence, and that's a very, very hard issue. The big gray zone, some of us had a conversation earlier informally about the nuances and complexities, particularly for depression.
Thank you very much for that very complete answer. Now, don't run. That does complete our formal sessions, but first I want to thank both of our speakers and all of you who asked questions. Let's give them a big round of applause. And then Tony, who does just about everything, I want to ask her if she has anything particular to say right now. I have one thing to say, and then I'm going to turn it over to you. Is Joe Beck still here? It seems he may have stepped out. I simply want all of us to recognize that he played a major role in making this meeting possible, and we're very grateful. So even in his absence, give him a big hand.